All right. Hello, everybody. Again, I know we were talking behind the scenes, but now we're going to let everybody else in. Just a quick welcome to everyone. I want to introduce our ASL person, Danielle Bradford. She will be signing, interpreting for us today. I'm Shalanda. I will be hosting this conversation today. Shalanda Sims. I am the founder and director of World Stage Theater. We are an arts organization. For those of you who are following us, you already know about us, but we are an arts organization. We were founded in 2006. So we've been around for a little while, working with youth and young adults in the community, making sure that we're amplifying voices that aren't normally heard. So don't really want to take a lot of time. I want to jump into it. We only have an hour and I want to see how much ground we can cover. No pun intended, ground. You got that? Okay, anyway. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. We will start with Jerry, and then Marissa, Brian, and Bill. Jerry, you're muted.
Did it again. There you go. Jerry Foster with Passing On a Theater Company, passing on art, history, and culture from one generation to the next.
Hi, I'm Marissa Wolf. I'm the artistic director at Portland Center Stage at the Armory, and I've been here for a couple of years in this post, and I'm so thrilled to join this conversation today.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Weaver, one of the co-founders of Portland Playhouse. Portland Playhouse started, about 2 years after World Stage Theater, Shalanda, in 2008, and I'm the producing artistic director at Portland Playhouse, and we do both theater productions and education programs.
Hello, I am Bill Ray, director, actor, mostly directing now, and have been in the Portland area back and forth for almost over 25 years or so, living in Seattle first, now living in Portland, Oregon.
Wow. Welcome. So we're having this conversation, and all of these organizations are special to me. When I first came back to the theater community, Jerry welcomed me with open arms, and I worked with Passing Art. And then my second after Portland Opera, I did Dreamgirls at PCS. And then Brian, Portland Playhouse, they were our fiscal sponsor to help us get off the ground, help World Stage Theater get off the ground. And so, yeah. And so Bill, we haven't met in person. So this is my first time really meeting Bill. Hopefully since you live here now, we'll get to.
Yeah.
But Jerry insisted that Bill should be a part of this conversation. And I agree, because he has done a lot of August Wilson's work. So I'm very happy that all of you agreed to have this discussion. I just want to check the room. How is everyone feeling today? I mean, there is a lot going on, right? Like, we don't need to state the obvious that we're in a pandemic, and there's just a lot of racial unrest and yeah. So how is everyone doing in that regard?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. I'm still having a hard time trying to deal with every other day. When you think it's over, it is still continuing. And I'm relating to, I guess you all know about Blake, who just, 7 times in the back. That's just senseless. And I'm thinking, Why? You know, I never even thought my daughter would see it, you know, and to live to go through this. And now here I am, you know, I grew up with it. I'm still living with it. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm angry. I'm just really, really hurtfully angry, you know. So, and I'm trying not to be, you know, but you know,
yeah,
that's where we are.
yes,
that's where I am right now.
Yeah, anyone else? I don't want to interject it. You guys can just go as you please.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, Bill. And I was spending a lot of day feeling grief and just sort of feeling the pressure and the loss of Black life and the violence. And, but it's funny because you said you're feeling angry and trying not to. I'll take some of that anger because I'm trying to let go of my grief and get a little bit more angry.
Yeah.
You know, as someone who's growing up as a white boy and experienced a lot of privilege. And I think about like the crazy things I used to do as a teenager and in my 20s with the police. I used to do all kinds of things, and I wouldn't be here, you know. If my skin was Black, I would have been shot because of all of the things I did, and I need to be more angry about that.
I know for me, I have to chime in with Bill. You know, the only reason why we're seeing a lot more of this is because of smartphones and the internet. Now think about it, when they didn't exist, it was happening on more of a weekly basis, so to speak. You know, and this isn't nothing new. You know, it's just that now we're able to actually see what's going on here in America, and I'm tired. You know, I say it time and time again. Don't bring concessions. Bring change. If you're going to bring concessions, don't bother, because that means things will not change. So it's okay for 4 to 6 months, but after that, it's back to business as usual. So, you know, I'm like Bill, I'm tired of seeing it, you know, and I think that we have to be able to look at what's going on and have to make those changes for it in each and every one of us. There's a saying, you know, I am part of the solution. And so if we don't take it up individually, being a part of the solution, then it's going to continue to go on.
And the sad part about what we're saying is that our anger is still getting us killed. I mean, because the sheriff in Kenosha, he said if they hadn't been out there, they wouldn't have been killed. The other people who got shot. I'm like, who says that kind of stuff? You know what I'm saying? What do you mean if they hadn't have been out there? They're out there because they're angry. And your job is to serve and protect. What does that mean anymore?
Right. Yeah.
And I will just add to this mix. Then I feel like, you know, as a white person and as an artistic director, I feel like it's on me and it's on everyone and all white people and leaders to ask, how is the work that I'm doing in what I'm programming and how I am moving through this world, in my career and in the body of work I'm creating as a producer and a director, either fighting this violence actively through anti-racism or perpetuating it. And I think that the perpetuation of the violence through what we have lifted in the American theater for so long, I feel deeply, I feel deeply inside of that. What I mean is I am complicit in those systems. So I think about that. I think about that as a white person when I'm going to post something, you know, am I going to post something, hashtag Black Lives Matter? That's fine. But what am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all. Yeah, I am feeling all type of emotions, and angry, tired, exhausted, frustrated, hopeless sometimes, just all types of emotion, and just tired of talking about it in the way that, like Jerry said, I don't really want to hear anything. I want to see change. I want to see things put into action, things put into place to change the systems. And that's kind of, where I am right now. There was, I was watching this show, and it was also talking about how Black people are demonized when we get angry. Like we don't have the right to get angry. Then we're called criminals, or, dangerous. We're dangerous. And I mean, historically, we know there are those words, key words to get people to look at us a certain way. So, we try to control that anger, but I think with this generation right now, they are not having it. So thank you again for sharing. I just wanted to get the temperature in the room because it's important as we go into this conversation about August Wilson. So in 2019, World Stage Theater acquired the August Wilson monologue competition from Kevin Jones and the Red Door Project. They brought the competition to Portland in the 2014-2015 season. But because of work that they are doing, they decided that this was too much for them and decided to give it to us. So I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, we immediately started strategizing to see how can we get more people to know about August Wilson. I don't know about you, but in high school, I majored in theater. I was in the theater arts program in high school. When I went to college, I was in theater. I never heard about August Wilson. Like, he wasn't in the curriculum where, at the schools I went to. So we were trying to see how can we introduce or reintroduce August Wilson to different audiences. And we came up with this idea of August and August. So we'll just take the whole month of August and share information about August Wilson. And it's really been nice to have different artists involved and just sharing this information about him with people who don't have any idea about who he is. And then we can talk about that as well. Like, why don't people know who August Wilson is? It's a shame that, that we don't know who he is with all of the work that he's done. But so my first introduction to August Wilson was the early 2000s when I saw Fences. And that was my introduction to August Wilson. And then my son happened to join the competition. Well, actually, a student of mine joined the competition the first year. My son joined the second year and won. And then my daughter won last year. So I guess I'm in this thing now. But what was your first introduction to August Wilson?
Well, I mean, I have to go back to when I first read. I was artistic director of a theater company in Tacoma, Washington, called Ndaba Cultural Ensemble. And Ndaba is a Nigerian word, media community consensus. Mm-hmm. And I came across this script called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And I'm like, who is this? And because of my affiliation and research of Lloyd Richards, who was the facilitator of his first six plays, that's how I came in contact with August. And then I had the opportunity to meet August when I was asked to understudy piano lesson at Seattle Rep back in 1992. Mm-hmm. And from that point forward, I ran into August all the time. I knew I had his address at his office, where he had an office in Pioneer Square. I would run into him and sitting in a bar or something, or somewhere just looking and watching people and stuff. And I remember one of the last times I had an opportunity to talk with him was in 1996, I believe. I was doing a play at ACT in Seattle, and I ran into August as I was out trying to purchase a new satchel, and there he was just sitting there. And I was on board to go back to Texas once I left ACT in Seattle to do his Joe Turner's Come and Gone. And August talked to me for an hour, talking to me about the play and about the character that I was playing in Harold Loomis. And I took all of that information with me back to that production. And it really helped me get through it. And I remember him telling me that he said that I'm playing Harold Loomis, who cuts himself, at the end, right around the end of the play. And he said by the time he got to that moment when he was writing, his shirt was all sweaty and wet. It was like, and I'm sitting here listening to this guy. I'm like, my God, he's giving me all this information I can take back, And then I would see him sparingly when I moved back to Seattle in '97. And again, every time I was running into him, he was somewhere out looking around and stuff. And I was not around during the last part of his life, which I wish I had been, but I wasn't. But that's my take on my personal relationship with it.
Thank you.
I'll just share that, Bill, it's so powerful to hear you speak about that personal connection with Wilson. I have encountered a handful of different artists who also had personal relationships with him. And for me, it feels like, because I'm similar to you, Shalanda, in terms of like I really first encountered him in the early 2000s. And I've always then thought of him as a sort of like legend, like, a 20th century master. And so, actually, that's maybe a problematic term to use, but a 20th century great, that it is one of our major American writers. And so to me, it feels really exciting to hear those stories of having a drink with the man himself. But one of the first Wilson plays I saw was Gem of the Ocean at American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, which is a huge, like 1,000-seat house. And I can still, how it doesn't matter whether you're a theater maker or not, if you've had this feeling and this experience at theater where you're in the audience and you're just like lifted, you are inches off your seat. That was my experience watching Gem, particularly the end and the theatrical storytelling that connects to body and spirit and history. And so I'll never forget the images. I mean, I can call forth, and that was many, many years ago, but what it felt like to encounter his work for the first time was pretty profound.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to find out about him in the mid to late 80s when Ma Rainey Black Bottom was done here in Portland. I got an opportunity to see that production. And I was intrigued. I was sitting on the edge of my seat trying to, figure out what's coming next, what's going on, how is this going to unfold, and the way he told the story really, really drew me in. And so I was at the National Black Theater Festival in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and I was sitting in a hotel and August walked by. And so I got up and went and approached him and introduced myself. So we went into the restaurant and sat down to eat. And it was funny because August always spoke his mind.
Yes.
His words were, they need to understand that Black people eat more than grits. And we talked for a long time, and he was telling me about Jitney. Jitney was one of the earlier plays that he wrote. He didn't like it. And so he put it on the shelf. And he said he was cleaning his office, and one day he ran across it in his desk, and he went over and read it and said, I need to put this out there. And he said, so, and as a matter of fact, that Jitney was playing at the National Black Theater Festival, and it was a really good piece. And from then on, I really like how he told a story for Black America, and how he really captured the characters, and the characters were all real. So that was my early experience with him.
I'm so jealous. My experience with August Wilson, I guess I consider him to be a teacher of mine, and really just from his plays. But I'm so jealous of the experience that Bill and Jerry, you both had in meeting him. And but first, Shalanda, you just sort of slipped in. You were like telling the story of the August Wilson monologue competition. Then you're like, oh yeah, and then my daughter won, and then you like barely, your daughter won. That's amazing, and then your son won.
Yeah.
Yep. So I just wanted to take a moment
right there.
We're in the presence of greatness, as so I wanted to say that. And then I'd seen a couple plays, and also had that same experience of being lifted, being educated. A play that just does everything. It hits you. It hits me in the gut. It hits me in the mind. It educates me. And I directed Radio Golf, which was in Portland Playhouse's second season. So our first season, it wasn't really even a season. We just did a couple plays. And the second season, we partnered with Bobby Brame and Bass Roots Theater Company to produce August Wilson's Radio Golf. And I really, at the time, I loved the play. I loved August Wilson's work, but I was really ignorant. I was really ignorant to the true racist history of Oregon, to the real dynamics going on, and even I would say the deepest level of the dynamics of the play itself. But it's a play about gentrification. It's a play about two Black businessmen, Harmon Wilkes, who is soon to be mayor of Pittsburgh, and a real estate developer, Roosevelt Hicks, who is a banker, a VP of Mellon Bank, and they have a grand redevelopment project for the Hill District, Pittsburgh's African American neighborhood, and it involves Whole Foods and a Starbucks and a Barnes and Noble bookstore, and the crux of the play is this issue of conscience that comes up, and of a house that they acquired illegally, or learned that it was acquired illegally. They didn't necessarily do it. It's a question is when in life's past injustices, who is to blame? But they were the beneficiaries of it, and so the play begins this struggle of what they're going to do. And this play, as we were doing it in the King neighborhood in Portland, we were living the play, because we were. Here I am, a white director coming from out of town, moving in, finding myself in a formerly Black church, and putting on a play about race and gentrification. And it was, for me, that battle of conscience, of what it means to hold power and privilege, what it means to be part of a racist tradition, what it means to every day being, and as someone said it earlier, this question of that there may have been a time where people mistakenly, certainly white people mistakenly thought that there was something called being not racist, but now we know that everything you do, every action, every policy, every thought, it's either racist or anti-racist. There's no middle ground. There's no sort of innocent, like, not me, it wasn't me, it was somebody else, I didn't do it. So that play for me set me on that path of realizing that every thing I do is either racist or anti-racist. It's actually at the 10 years ago, I didn't have that language, but and the play was, it was an education. So the other thing I want to say about August Wilson, in addition to admiring him and trying to get behind and be in support of his politics to the extent that I can as a white man, I also sort of, I found this kinship in his story as an artist. He was a young artist he was an idealist. He was a believer in Black Power movement, and believed that theater was a way, that this antiquated form of storytelling was a way of actually changing the world, that we could do that as renegade artists. And he started a theater company when he was a young man, and he and so that sort of artist with a capital A, and artist and activist together, that was part of his journey, is one that I have also resonated with, that has, whatever that word is, that has lived with me as something that resonated with me as an artist.
Yeah. Thank you all. We kind of already talked about this. We talked about his work, and that was going to be our next segue. But I mentioned that my introduction was Fences, and then I had a chance to see Timothy Douglas, who directed The Color Purple. He directed Gem of the Ocean in Baltimore. And so when I was dropping my son off there in DC, I had a chance to see that. And you're right, Marissa, it just takes you to a place that I think it just embodies this spiritual experience that just takes you away. And we know that Chadwick Boseman, who just passed, but they just finished filming Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So I'm excited to see that on the screen. But that is actually one of the third books that I had a chance to, his plays. I read Fences, then Gem of the Ocean, and then Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So it'll be nice to see that, because I haven't seen that produced on stage yet. So that will be nice to see. I know Portland Playhouse did it, right, Brian? Portland Playhouse did Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Directed by Kevin Jones, featuring Jerry Foster.
Okay, Jerry. Okay. Yeah, so I'll be excited to see that. We also, our team had an opportunity to visit Pittsburgh and to see where August Wilson lived. It was a sight to see, and just to be there in that space. We had a chance to walk through his old home, where he grew up, and his nephew gave us the tour. So that was pretty nice. So even though I'm late to the party, I feel like, I'm getting acclimated, and that I'm a part of the family. So that's been good for us. But let's talk about August Wilson's work and why we don't know about it, and why it's special. What is so important about August Wilson? I know for me, when I first saw Fences, I was like, what? I know this language. Like, that's my family. Like, I know these people. My uncle is like that, or, my aunt is like that. So I could relate, and it wasn't something that I remember studying with Shakespeare and Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, all of the ones that you have to study in school. So in high school, in college. So that opened up a new door for me personally. And I actually went back to get my degree in English because I wanted to be able to tell the story, because I was tired of the politics of theater. So before I came back to theater as an actress, I was writing to change be a part of the change and tell those narratives that weren't being shared. So for you though, what is it about his work?
Well, with August, I mean, as any great playwright, he's very specific and very universal at the same time. Specific because it's too African American way of living, and he expresses that thoroughly. And universal because he talks about the themes of love, friendship, family, all those things are universal. And so he compiles all that into his writing and his thought process. I think the other thing what's funny is that when Ma Rainey was first done back in '84, I think it was '84, the critics panned it in some ways because it was not European enough, is what they said. And then what does he do? He said, okay, all right, you want to hit me for that? I'll tell you what, this is what I'll do. He went and wrote Fences. And if you do your homework and look it up, Fences won every major award you can win in the theater that year. And I mean, I don't think I don't think there was any room for anybody else to win anything, because it won everything from the Pulitzer to the Tony to the OB. He said, okay, now am I done with you or what? So then he comes back and he goes back to writing the way he wants to write, which then I think it was Joe Turner's Come and Gone, which is probably one of his best plays and the hardest. I mean, it's probably not as accessible as some of his other plays, but it is probably one of the best written plays of his canon, in my opinion. And that's hard to say, because I love Two Trains. I love, which I've been a part of 5 times, actually. I've directed. Actually, I was starting my 3rd directing of 7. Before we got closed down. And looking to bring it back, hopefully in the spring of 2021. But that's what makes August Wilson. I mean, and when you read it, and Jim and the Ocean, I have not seen, but I've read it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible, and another piece that's probably not easy to do, as well. But that's August for me. I mean, and he is probably right there at the top of my list of playwrights, along with Lorraine Hansberry and I can't think of his name right now. A South African playwright, Ethel for God. He's right there with those 3 my tops. August is right there with him, neck to neck. Photo finish.
Yeah, Lorraine is one of my favorites.
Lorraine, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my take.
Thank you. Who else? Jerry?
I guess I shouldn't leave too much here. But in thinking about August and the way August wrote, you have to think of it in terms of Black theater, and when Black theater was first started in 1821, I'm sorry. And during that time, it became a movement that was encompassing plays written by, for, and about Black people. And August, when he wrote, he wrote these plays that were universal in a sense, the storyline that everyone could understand or to become enamored with. He had a great way of putting the putting the vernacular together with the language, and how he took each character, and each character's just jumped off the page. And like you said, you know, each one of his characters, you know them as someone in your family or someone that you're close to, you know, and that is what really, really sparked that interest in him, is the fact that he was able to put those stories out there and to share the culture. See, the thing about it is that you can do a play and not understand what the play is, not understand what the play is about, you know, but you have to really dive deep into the foundation of that play. And that play was centered on the culture of Black America. And so he just had a great way with that. When I saw Joe Turner, like Bill mentioned Joe Turner, when I first saw Joe Turner was down at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And I tell you, I was deeply moved. I had to go see it again because I couldn't believe the stories. And there was people in there that I knew, you know, from where I grew up. There were folks that was there. And so he made those characters real, you know, so.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have anything to add to that. I mean, it's really powerful. Yeah, I think I feel held by Wilson's language. I feel like I can just like take a deep breath and like be carried on this journey, and it will break my heart. It will break my freaking heart, and you just know that at the top of the show.
And my first opportunity to even be in a August play was here in Portland, actually, and what was OSF, which is now PCS, and production of Fences. I was an understudy for that one in that one, but that was an opportunity for me to get to know this guy's writing and his style, and understanding how to, because I mean, you know, the language is so dense, and it's so important to understand that language and be able to get underneath it and get it out there. So that was my first experience, and then it went from there to being able to do another understudy role and piano lesson, as I said, and then I got an opportunity to finally be on the stage, and in my first production of Two Trains Running at a theater in Texas called Stage West. They brought me in, and from that point forward, I was able to do other works by him, either acting or directing. So it's been a pleasure over the years, and I again look forward to bringing Seven back with Passing Art this next spring, hopefully.
Oh, sorry, my phone's. Oh, there we go. Hey, I came up through theater doing a lot of Shakespeare, and for me, when I encountered August Wilson, he was the closest contemporary writer that captured some of what Shakespeare was. I mean, it's the combination of being a poet. So he was a poet. He began as a poet, and he is able to effortlessly go between prose and poetry, and capture just the most accurate nuances, moment to moment nuances of life, of daily life, and of daily Black life, and then flip it into this into poetry that is soaring, that is universal, that is so it's that prose poetry, and I think also he was a student of human nature, and also an intellectual, voracious reader that he and I think I read somewhere that his recall, like he could just, you know, he could hear a conversation and then write it down. He could his memory, and I think that was a similarity with Shakespeare, of being able to coming from an oral culture, Shakespeare writing during an oral culture, that ability to mix those two worlds. Was there anything else I was going to say there? I think that's it.
Thank you.
He started back, you know, I mean, I think what brought August into the fray of theater and not just being a poet was his good friend Claude Purdy, who ended up asking him to taking him to Minnesota and developed his place there at the Phenomenal Theater. And I remember reading where he said when he was first sent his plays to the O'Neill Center, they didn't accept him, and he had sent. And matter of fact, he sent one play twice, just to see, and then all of a sudden, of course, Ma Rainey came across the desk of Lloyd Richards, and from that point forward, he became August Wilson that we know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bill, you talked about how he originally did Ma Rainey and it wasn't accepted. It wasn't good enough. So he had to go, he had to do Fences. And Toni Morrison talked about the white gaze and how, and as we get into August Wilson's The Ground on Which I Stand, he kind of alludes to that as well, as having to please white audiences and writing for white audiences, Black playwrights, Black theater, Black performances or cast who are, cast in a show at a white theater, but it's directed for the white audience. And so I thought that was important that you mentioned that he had to go and write Fences, and it won all of these awards.
I still have that newspaper from way back when the New York Times, when they showed all those awards that he won. I'm like, okay, what else can I do now?
Right.
But August also said, I write for an audience of one, me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he said. I write for an audience of one. Now you either accept my work or you don't accept my work. And then, I don't think there's a lot of people who have not seen August's work and then leave out and touched in some way. When we did, when I directed for Jerry over at Passanart, Two Trains, back 2 years ago, in 2018, a lot of the audience was white.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it was packed white. I mean, they came to see the play. I mean, and they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And they stayed for the talkbacks,
right.
Which was more than half a house would stay, and they want to know. They wanted to talk. They want to have this conversation. Okay, now what can I do? Because sometimes we can go to the theater and we can sit there and we can enjoy the play, and then when we leave the theater, we go back to the same thing that we were doing.
Very true.
It's like, what did we learn? If this all you're gonna do is just sit here and talk about it, but not take it outside and do something about it. So we got to be able to do what we. I mean, I believe that there's more of us good people than it is bad people. So us good people got to get together.
Right.
And get things moving.
Bill, I've got a question. When you direct, do you direct for a white audience or do you direct for a Black audience, or do you think of it in those terms?
I don't think of it in those terms. I direct to make the show work. I try to tell the story that I see on the page. I'm not thinking about this or that. I'm looking at these actors and I ask questions. I let them do their thing. Is what I let them do, and I give them food for thought. That's what I do. So I just try to give an actor information that will get them to the place where I'd like to see them get to, and make sure that we're all in the same boat going in the same direction. So we're not traveling different directions and stuff. It's like, wait a minute, what do we do? What are you doing? I'm gonna come on back. So I throw out, and I like for actors to take chances. Lord Richards once said, there's 13 choices out there. Why are you taking one? Just look at all these choices and then narrow it down. So I direct for to tell the story. I try to tell the story that the playwright wants to tell.
And let me clarify that when I was speaking of white gays, I wasn't speaking of Black directors. I'm speaking of white directors who direct Black work or Black shows who might not understand the culture, and through their lens they think that it should be a certain way to appease the white audiences. But you're definitely right. We have to just tell the story, and that's what made or makes August Wilson's work so powerful, is that he just told the story, right? And anyone who comes to see his work will get that.
Well,
right?
you have to allow it to happen. I remember when I was doing Fences, and the audience, of course, was white, and one of the ushers came down to try to quiet one of the audience members who was Black, and the audience member who was Black told the usher who was white, "Honey, I'm testifying, leave me alone." And the director had to go in and talk to the staff, and they explained to him that Black folks are very vocal. And if you say something that resonates, they're gonna say something, you know. So I think that comes with the education of communicating to your people, to your staff, and your staff, you know, making sure that everyone knows what they're in for.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the ground on which I stand, because we're about 10 minutes out, and hopefully we don't run out of time. But we see you, White American Theater, with all of what is going on in the world, especially after the public lynching of George Floyd. People were up in arms. America, it was like people, it seemed like people finally saw or understood what Black people had been knowing all along, but it seemed like, okay, this is real. Like this is not okay. But it also sparked, in my opinion, this uprising with Black people just finally feeling like they could speak, like they had had enough and weren't willing to go backwards. So they put out, theater artists put out the statement, "We see you, White American Theater." And you all are familiar with the statement. Let's talk about that and their demands. They have a long list. There's a long list, and I'm saying they, but I'm a part of that group as well. But there's a long list of demands, and to my knowledge, as of today, there has been no response from Broadway, from larger theaters. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about, because they took their premise from August Wilson's The Ground on Which I Stand. And there's so much in that speech. I mean, he, in 1996, really spoke about a lot of things in that speech. He spoke about what kind of our conversation today, you know, with just having to study the, you know, the greats like Shakespeare, but how Black people can't be judged just on that canon, but from the experiences that we have as Black people, which aren't the same as European people. And that needs to be valued as well. And then how, you know, he was heavily influenced by the Black Power movement, and just so how our different experiences shape who we are. And we can't just have this one-sided story. And he also talked about the Black theater and how it's devalued and how it's evident that it's not valued by the lack of funding it receives. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the Black theater is less than, right? Or that we can't rise to the occasion of art, you know, and producing it in a most excellent way. But it's that we don't have the same opportunities, especially when it comes to funding. And he went back to talk about the white audience. So I can go on and on about that, but I want to hear your what you think about this, the ground on which I stand, and We See You White American Theater.
I don't think it's changed a lot over the years, and it's a shame because we're talking 1996 and now it's not 2020, and we still have those same issues going on. It's no different than the issues that you spoke of a George Floyd, who I think in some ways, I think that movement was started by the mothers, because that one of the last words you heard from George Floyd was he's calling out to his mama. Mm-hmm. And the mothers said, okay, enough is enough. Right. You know, but I don't think it's changed. I don't think it's changed a lot anyway. You know, a lot of the theaters around the country, African-American theaters, they're not getting the same sort of monies that the white theaters are getting. And I don't get that. You know, I think that there should be a more equal, and I think that's what he talked about the equality, about being equal. I mean, about parity. That's what he was talking about back then. And he was also talking about commonalities, a common ground, find a common ground, you know, of which we're still trying to find a common ground. I'm thinking, what's missing here? What am I missing? What are you missing? Why can't we do this? What's so difficult about it? So.
Yes.
I'll jump in too. Thank you, Bill. I totally agree. I mean, rereading Wilson's speech from 1996. And, you know, it feels that it is right in line with so many of the exciting articles and essays being published right now. It is calling for the things that our field still needs. And I think I felt a great sense of horror that the American theater did not heed Wilson's voice in 1996. Yeah. And the movement that he was calling forth. And I'll say, in terms of the We See You White American Theater and the incredible and expansive demands list that is I think like 54 demands specifically for theaters, but then also for multiple demands for critics, for prizes, awards, for education settings, funders. So holistic. And I think that it feels like an incredible gift that artists, BIPOC artists, Black, Indigenous, people of color artists have put in so much time, energy, labor, thought to create this document. And it's a gift to the American theater. And I will just say, as one of the theaters who is PWI, predominantly white institution, that this is a really powerful moment to continue this work of reckoning, to continue the equity, diversity, and inclusion work that PCS has been doing, but with more rigor, with more depth, and with a holistic action plan ahead of us. I feel hopeful that as we row in our tiny boats to the other shore of the pandemic, that we're bringing like the wood with us to rebuild a better theater, specifically like a better theater and a better field because of this work, because we know that, for example, that when Black Lives Matter, all lives will matter. And
Yes.
that is true for theater. And then Shalanda, just specifically to the response, I will say that there was an email sent to, I think, many artistic directors across the country, including myself, that said, please let us know by when we can expect a public response. And so for PCS, we said you can expect a public response by October 31st. But so that was just an internal conversation with the We See You team, whoever is managing that email address. And so at PCS, we have a wonderful inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility team led by Rochelle Schmidt, who is sort of curating conversations for the full staff as we go point by point, demand by demand, to figure out where we are and where we need to go. So that's what I can share.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're running out of time. Any last remarks? Anything you want to say that you didn't get a chance to say in about 30 seconds?
Thank you for allowing me to be here today and to give voice to the situation. So I'm very appreciative of that. Here. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for hosting this conversation. I think there needs to be more of this conversation that take place, but also to connect that with action. You know, we can sit and talk all day and not say anything.
Yes.
You know, but all it takes is just a movement to make
right.
it to create action.
Yes. And that was going to be my last question. Where do we go from here? Where do we go?
What Jerry, what you said earlier, not making concessions, but making real change.
Yeah.
I'll hold that up. Yeah. No, we need another hour. We're just getting started.
We do. Right. We do. Maybe we'll have to organize it and maybe do a part 2 or something. I want to leave you with this quote. James Baldwin said, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist." Mm-hmm. And with that, we are going to head out. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we'll do it again. Definitely.
Okay.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalanda.
Bye.